I was here in the office. I'm the patrol division commander, so most of my duty day is spent in the office. And I received a phone call from one of the supervisors in the field who had indicated that we had a fire in Black Forest. That's not the first time I've gotten a call about a fire in Black Forest, and it wasn't the last. We've had several fires in Black Forest. So the initial call wasn't too alarming, but within a matter of minutes, I started getting additional calls, and they were talking about the size of this fire. So obviously, we started to respond some units that direction. I turned the radio so I could hear it a little better, and I started notifying the chain of command that there was a fire in Black Forest that was of a sizable nature, and we were rolling a lot of resources that way.
I was actually the patrol shift day sergeant that was on duty when the event unfolded on June 11th. And I first was notified at about probably 5 or 10 till 1 o'clock. I just remember looking out the window and thinking, what a beautiful day. Sun was out, skies were blue, and I was thinking, how could this be happening such a wonderful day? And I was much like the commander. Initially, I wasn't too startled or too alarmed, because that time of the year, it's not out of the ordinary to have a small fire erupt. I just remember rolling up Interstate 25 towards Chute Road and seeing the amount of smoke that I saw out my front windshield, and it just blew me away. It was a sight to behold for sure, and I knew almost instantly at that moment that this was going to be a large-scale event.
I can tell you, as I was going up the interstate headed to Black Forest, the same as Sergeant Mitchell, I was amazed by the amount of smoke that was coming up, and I knew immediately this is going to be a big fire, and it's going to be long-lasting, and that we're going to really struggle to catch up on this. So my concern was, as I was going up the interstate, I was having a hard time getting there because of all the traffic, and just the sight in front of me was causing the traffic on the interstate to back up and stop so people could watch the smoke, and it was making it really difficult for me to get there. So I thought, geez, if I'm having a hard time getting there, I hope all the firefighters, I hope all the emergency personnel can get there. So as I got closer, I was a little more concerned with how are my guys going to handle this, because the radio channel I'm listening to on the police radio was only my guys. So I'm immediately thinking, geez, we'll never have enough personnel there to handle this event. It's too big and it's happening too fast. But I was very pleased when I arrived on scene to see that there were already tons of law enforcement there. We had the city of Colorado Springs, we had Monument, we had Palmer Lake, we had the Colorado State Patrol, we had tons of firefighting apparatus on the roadways. So it became pretty apparent to me pretty quickly that we weren't in this alone. We had a lot of help from a lot of other agencies.
For me, I assigned to the patrol division. I was actually on my way to work around 2 o'clock, headed southbound on Powers, and hearing some radio, clatter going on about, something going on up in Black Forest, and look in my rearview mirror and I just see this huge plume, and it was very reminiscent of the Waldo Canyon plume. And it just gave you that kind of gut feeling that something wasn't right.
In that initial hour, I would say that deputies were primarily just running house to house in front of the fire, trying to make sure people were out of the way. It's difficult to move that many people out of an area while so many people are trying to get into an area. The roadways were obviously one of the first things we had to take control of so that we could get people out safely, because people in a panic mode were using both lanes, trying to get in and out of the area to get home and grab things, or get home and check on family members while we're trying to bring people out of the area and get them to a safe zone. So we had to shut down a lot of roads and control a lot of traffic, which was frustrating for people, I'm sure, but in the interest of safety, it was something that needed to be done. And I don't think we could have done that had we not had the assistance of a lot of other agencies that were there to help us.
It's one of the first ones into the area. It's my job to scout where the fire was actually at, and to start trying to draw resources into those areas, and again preserve the life immediately in that area. What people forget when you go into a fire zone like that, fire brings with it so many different characteristics and dangers. Not only do you have the falling limbs from the trees, but you have melting electrical equipment above you, power lines that are literally melting. The fire was so hot that aluminum blocks and aluminum rims were melting off of cars. So when you're in those areas and you're scouting, you're bringing your resources in, you got to keep all of that in mind. And it can be literally terrifying. And in the background, all you hear are explosions. The best way to explain it's hell on earth. When the temperature is 1,000 to 2,000 degrees and things are vaporizing in front of you, full homes, 5,000, 6,000 square foot homes that disappear in a matter of minutes because of the heat and fire. That's a daunting task to ask somebody to go in and do what they did. Not only to do what they did, but to do it safely. I don't believe we had a single deputy that was injured. We definitely didn't have anybody killed on the law enforcement side. And I'm so proud of what they did. They didn't back down once.
You see what's going on, and everybody knows that a job needs to be done, and it gets done. Everybody works together like a seamless machine, and it's just, you know, it was wonderful. Me in particular, I was working on Holmes Road. You know, then you were letting us know, make sure you tag the houses that you do, and that came out pretty quick, and you know, that let everyone else know on the ground, you know, that you had been there, you know, trying to make contact with that residence. If you needed to run out of there, you know, trying to run, you know, you can't breathe, you're not getting as much oxygen, you know, and then you have all this gear. A lot of times, you know, you're running in these driveways, if they had gates, you know, you're running 50 yards up to a house and then running 50 yards back, and you know, then grabbing your tape and tying it off and then going up to the next one, you know, another 15 feet up to the next driveway, and same thing, just kind of going up and down, and you know, you just get focused on what you're doing, and you know, you don't worry that you're tired. And at some points that smoke was so thick that you're driving and you can't tell if you're moving away from the fire or towards the fire, and you're just hoping that, you know, there's not going to be a tree or, you know, a pole or, you know, stuff that's obstructing your way of getting out. One incident in particular, there was a few people that had gone to a house that we were told there was possibly an elderly couple that was having issues evacuating. So we were initially unable to get there in our vehicles because of the smoke. We found another road where we parked our patrol cars and went in on foot. Sergeant Mitchell actually came in from the north side and was able to get in with his vehicle, and we all kind of met there and determined that no one needed our assistance.
The fire at that point, that was on Juniper Road, the elderly couple we were sent in to check for. At one point, the fire on the side of the road was probably no more than 8 to 10 feet from the patrol unit, with flames 40 to 60 feet high. It was the temperature, the heat pushed before that flame was so hot that it was literally melting light bars, melting plastic parts of the car at that point. Those are the moments when you think to yourself, this is a dangerous incident. Am I going to get out of here?
After the Waldo Canyon fire, you know, we all as a community, I think, thought this will never happen again. You know, I've lived here all my life. That's the first big fire here in our community, and I think as a whole we thought, well, we've survived it, it'll never happen again. And then here we are 12 months later, we went through a very similar situation. So resulting from that has been some assessment of our equipment and our training. So we've adopted some additional training to help our deputies be better prepared for events such as this. We've went out and we've purchased Nomex clothing that we're going to outfit each patrol deputy with, so that in the event of a, you know, God forbid, another fire, every deputy assigned to patrol is going to have a full set of Nomex clothing that they can stop and put on before they go out and start these evacuations, because that Nomex clothing is more fire resistant. We're also going to put a air filter mask in each vehicle that'll help them to work in that smoky environment without having to breathe in all that smoke. It's not the same level of protection that a firefighter would have, but it's certainly better than what they had this time, which was nothing.
And I was on Gun Club Road, and I went up to a gentleman's porch. Could clearly see that the residence was occupied. I knocked on the door, identified myself in full uniform, and explained the danger that was coming his way. The fire was approximately a quarter of a mile from his residence at that point. The gentleman answered his door with a firearm, with a handgun. Told me to get off his porch, get off his property, where he'd shoot me where I stood. And quite frankly, in the midst of everything happening, that was a terrifying moment. I knew what kind of stress the man was under, but there's also an immediate threat at that moment. So I thanked him. I took a photograph of him with my cell phone and explained to him that I wished him the best. And on I moved to the next residence. I did go back 3 days later after the fire had moved through that area. The man's house had been burned to the foundation. Thankfully, the truck that was in the driveway at the time I had made contact was gone. And I later learned that that gentleman had evacuated about 15, maybe 10, 15 minutes after I'd made contact. But that's an interesting part to all of this. People don't act rationally sometimes.
Yeah, I can second that. When I was on Holmes Road, and it, you know, it was about a quarter mile away at that point, you know, trying to make contact with, you know, as many people as possible. And I had to jump one fence to go make contact, and was met with immediate, you know, hostility of, you know, get off my property, leave. And, you know, you're just trying to, you know, convey there's danger, you know, you need to leave, you know, please leave. And it's kind of, I don't know, it's kind of shocking, I guess, to be met with that sort of hostility, but then you have to understand, you know, like Sergeant Mitchell said, they're under a tremendous amount of stress and, you know, trying to collect their belongings and, you know, everything that means the world to them. And, you know, the last thing they want is somebody coming up and telling them to leave even quicker.
A couple of times I was out and about, I encountered a road where we lost vision. We couldn't see very well. The smoke was so thick. The fire was on both sides of the road. And you get so far into that smoke that you don't know, should I continue or should I stop? Should I back up? You don't know where your safe zone is. So we continued for quite a ways, and then when the vehicle came to a stop, my immediate fear was this vehicle's gonna die, and we're gonna have to walk out of here. And quite frankly, we wouldn't know which direction to go. So we were able to get in reverse and get out of there back to where we could see again. And you know, that happened to me once, but I know for a fact that it happened to these folks constantly as they were out there trying to evacuate these people.
One of the most surreal things in the midst of it with how thick the smoke was, you could be going down a road and you couldn't even see the end of your car, and then suddenly there'd be a pocket of clear, fresh air. And out of nowhere, almost like a movie, animals were constantly crossing your paths. Horses that had been released, dogs that were running for their lives. And it was something straight out of a horror movie, because they would just run out of the smoke, run in front of you, and then disappear back into the smoke. And that's one of the memories that just sticks with me. I've never seen anything like that in 15 years.
For me, I'm an animal person, so you know, a lot of the houses that I knocked on that didn't have people there and I saw their animals inside, I mean, that's where we at.
You know, one of the things that sticks in my mind is occurred more after the fire had been brought under control than anything was, I was out doing some site assessment and I realized that all those roads in Black Forest aren't major roads, and they don't all run north, south, east, and west. There are little neighborhoods and little pockets down there that I was unaware of. And as I drove through and observed each of those homes or structures that had been burned, I realized that my deputies had been down every one of those roads, because you could see the yellow crime scene tape. Some cases it was in great shape, in other cases it had been melted and fallen to the ground. But it reminded me that the deputies had been down every road, and they tied a little bit of crime scene tape to every mailbox or fence post at the gate as a visual cue, or as a tag, as Deputy Lowry said, to let others know that this house has already been evacuated. It's unbelievable they were able to do that throughout the entire Black Forest.